Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Melissa Ulven. Great to see you. Let's pretend we haven't been chatting for the last 20 minutes.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much, Simon.
So we've come up with this theme on the basis of something that Melissa said last time we spoke. And the theme is grace, and we're talking about grace for others and by grace for ourselves. So what does grace mean to you?
Yeah, I think how I think about grace, and this is an idea not necessarily based in a religious context, which I think a lot of people, when they hear grace, that's where they go to. But it's more about honesty with ourselves and understanding of ourselves and others, like deep understanding. And it isn't necessarily a space of forgiveness, which that can happen, but it's really a space of understanding where somebody else is coming from, and that helps really understand, give us better understanding of ourselves as
well. Yeah. So is it kind of related to empathy then?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, I guess that's a synonym you can have for it too, right? It is absolutely empathy.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the fact that you said it doesn't mean necessarily forgiveness.
No, I have some pretty strong feelings about how we look at forgiveness in our society, or many people tend to kind of the forgive and forget. There are some actions that I feel, and this is all on a personal level because each person is going to have a different threshold, right? I feel that forgiveness is not for myself warranted to others depending on the actions, right? However, I can work to understand why somebody did what they did. I don't have to forgive it, but I can work to understand why they did it. And that helps with my growth as a person as well.
Okay. So before we started recording, you said essentially like context is everything, or something along those lines.
Yes.
So I totally agree with you. And also I feel that maybe I'm asking these questions that are too kind of willy-nilly strategic, do you know what I mean? Like in a theoretical context,
sure,
rather than a specific context. So let's dive into the specific context and you and your story and why grace is important for you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so as a little bit of background on myself, I was a domestic infant adoptee in the United States, in Oregon. And I came into foster care at 6 months old. I had been premature, teenage pregnancy, with not a lot of family support. So at a year old, I was adopted by my foster. And this is where the context really begins, because to understand my viewpoints on grace, as it were, really have to dig into my adoptive mother's story. So she was also adopted, part of the, I guess the term is
baby scoop
era. There we go. Yes, she was part of that. Born in 1946. And kind of a product of a wartime one night stand, and she was given up for adoption, and her adopted family, her adopted father died when she was 2, and it seems like from the stories that she had told that her adopted mother didn't really want her. It was really him that wanted this child. They already had a biological son. So her mother remarried when my adopted mother was, I think, 5 or 6. And this is who she considered her father, who I consider my grandfather. And he really loved her. She adored him, but she grew up with a lot of abuse from her adoptive mother. And she ended up having a teenage pregnancy at 17, which she was forced to give up for adoption as well. So she completes the full triad as one individual. Now, where the grace comes in is she had a lot of challenges growing up. She had a lot of traumas growing up that she never fully faced. And instead of being honest with herself, she developed these coping mechanisms that were destructive for other people. A lot of narcissistic behaviors, and I'm going to stop short of saying she's a narcissist, because I think that term can be used a little bit too freely. She's never been diagnosed, so I don't know, but there are some tendencies that she used throughout her life that were very damaging to others. And it's a very interesting thing to watch from the outside, is because she never really took the time to understand herself, understand others, understand her parents. She would use tactics to keep people close so they wouldn't leave her, but they were controlling tactics, which had the opposite effect and pushed everybody away. And so after a lifetime of dealing with these sorts of tactics, and there was a lot of them, but just to give a little bit of an example so you have the context. So she would do things like we would move nearly every 6 months growing up, because that was a thing that she could control. So when her life started feeling like she couldn't control it, she would control the space. So we would be moving all the time. And then she had 3 biological children from 2 different marriages. And she would do these, she would play favorites and then like pit the children against each other. So it was kind of a tumultuous time growing up. I was adopted at let's see, my closest sibling in that family is 8 years older than me. So I was there's a big age gap. So a lot of my life I grew up alone. And I struggled hard living in this family, and it came to a point where through a lot of therapy, I was able to like set boundaries with her, which didn't go over well, which ended up really causing an estrangement with us that has been for the past 7 years. But here we get up to the present, and I have done a lot of thinking about like how she came to the space that she is now, like what made her who she is. And I'm in a unique situation, also being an adoptee, to understand why she is the way she is, and to really think about it in maybe a different perspective for biological children. So I have that like grace, that understanding, that honesty to know why she is the way she is. Well, a couple weeks ago, I got a surprise phone call from her. And she turns out she's in assisted living, she's on hospice, and she is dying. And it was a lot of conflicting feelings. Like, her biological children are also estranged. They don't speak, nobody speaks to her. None of the family is there for her, which is sad. It's so sad. All of her coping mechanisms and tactics to keep people close has pushed everyone away. And so I spoke with her. I told her these things, that like, I understand you. Like, I understand who you are. And the flip side of this is, when, and this is confirmed through like hospice nurses and people that are around others who are dying, that when you're dying, usually you don't have this sudden change of heart and you become a different person. You become more of the person that you've always been. And this is absolutely the case here. Is she wanted me to take on a lot of financial responsibilities and things that that there were gonna be a lot, and there's nobody else to do them in a way to, and I won't get into the details here, but just it was another tactic for her to get a sum of money that she had come into, but if she accepted it, she would lose all her Medicaid benefits that were paying for her care. And she wanted me to basically find a loophole, probably do some illegal things to get this money that was really a drop in the bucket as per her care costs are. So I talked with our caseworker and decided that I couldn't take on this responsibility, but I could go see her. I could be there for her. And that's what I had decided. The caseworker, I guess, called her and told her this. And so my mother called me again and told me that if I was just coming to say goodbye, that she didn't want me. She said, don't bother. Because I wasn't taking on the things that she wanted me to do. So she's like, no, I don't want you here. So that's where I'm at right now. And I think because I have done a lot of thinking and granted, like, emotionally, that like was a lot for me. Like, it hurt. And also I was relieved.
Because you didn't have to see it, you mean?
No, I'm not afraid of seeing somebody on their deathbed. I've done this before, and I wasn't afraid of seeing her. I was afraid of the manipulations that she would bring onto me. I want to be there for her, as she's dying, because I feel like that's the right thing to do. And it's, for this particular person, it's not the safe thing for me to do for my own personal safety. but I can understand why she is like this in not jump to anger and not be, not necessarily like villainize her. Like, she's done a lot of terrible things to people, and that's not forgivable, but I can understand her as a human. And I think that can be very powerful and is useful, at least for me in the situation, to cope with it and find my own healing in it.
Yeah. Yeah. So does she know then that you're not going because you're not accepting her terms for the meeting?
Yes. Yeah.
And how did she respond to that?
Well, this, I didn't really give a chance for response. And this was partly a panic response in my case, where, I got into that fight or flight, and I just hung up on the call, because it was an immediate thing. Like, she called me and immediately went into this. It wasn't like a hi, how are you? Like, let's like chit chat or whatever. It was immediately into this, don't come see me. So I told her, like, I can't deal with this, and I hung up. And then I talked to the caseworker and let her know the situation, and that I can help the caseworker in anything that she needs. But my mom's laid this down, that she doesn't want me to see her, which is also kind of the same situation around where our estrangement happened in the first place. Is when I put down my boundaries, she's told me it was too painful to talk to me. So I was like, well, that's the end of the relationship. If this is too painful for you, then we can avoid that pain and in this way.
So was there a long period of time of, for the first period of your life when this grace, you didn't have that grace for her?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I mean, even to the point where the estrangement happened, and that was 7 years ago. I was really angry, and like I am depressed. Like, I went through a huge depression because of it, because that's another huge abandonment right there. That still hurts a lot. But yeah, like I was constantly going through this anger towards her, because she would be coming up to whatever in her life was too much for her, and then she'd get into these tactics where she's trying to control people. And so one of the methods that she would come back to using is health. So she would say, I only have 6 months to live. And she would try to manipulate people into jumping to her beck and call, because she's so sick and she's not going to live much longer. It's a little bit of a morbid joke in the family that she's had 6 months to live for the past 30 years, which is not it's not an exaggeration. So this was used when I was out. Like, I went to college in Alaska, which, if you're not familiar with geography, it's about 3,000 miles away from Oregon. And then I was doing field work on the West Coast, and so I'm very far away. And so she's feeling like she needs me there. So she would call me up and be like, "Oh, I have 6 months to live," or "I'm too sick, I can't come to your graduation," like those kind of things. So
Have you heard the
Every
phrase?
time.
Have you heard the phrase "crying wolf"?
Absolutely, yes, yeah. And it is such a crying wolf situation that at this point, when she said I'm on hospice, I was like, "Are you
Really?
sure? Like, I don't know if I believe this." But the it was confirmed from her caseworker that that was the case, and so like, I'm like, okay, like I've got another source, an outside source that is confirming this, so that's true. But yeah, it's been used so many times that every time it would happen, I would get angry. I would, if I was feeling strong enough in myself, I would call her out on it, which always blew up in my face because she would get angry. It would just become a big issue, and then I would feel bad about it. And then I would gaslight myself in that, like, maybe I shouldn't be so angry about this, or maybe I shouldn't really be meeting her at my graduation. Like, I don't know, like I would do these mental gymnastics to um, not put up the boundaries that I needed for myself, and just keep on like giving to her in what she needed. And yeah, that was a big lesson for me to learn on like understanding what I need, but also understanding who she is and how she operates in this world.
Yeah.
And that did not come about until, I really think that understanding did not develop in my brain until a couple of years ago. I think during the pandemic, I had the quietness and space to do a lot of inner reflection and understand myself and understand her, which was hard. It was hard, but
So,
very needed.
so you've been on this you've been on this anger cycle for like 20 odd years, yeah?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I, the estrangement didn't happen until I was about 35, I believe.
So
Um,
you're 42 now, right?
yeah, I'll be 42 next year.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. I'm just playing it back to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
You said it was about 7 years ago, the estrangement.
Yep. So, yeah, it was a big anger cycle, and I I was my worst self when I was with her in like the same space when we were, or talking on the phone. Like, she would bring out the worst in me, like, and I hated that. Like, I absolutely hated that. And um it was really hard to um be authentically me and also have a relationship.
Yeah. So I was on I'm trying to think. I think you'd slightly beaten me on the cycle, but I was on a cycle. I was on a business cycle. No, I think I might have beaten you actually. 95 to 22. Yeah, maybe slightly beaten you there. About 27 years, I say, like 27 years on some sort of um, different degrees of I need business success to be happy, basically. With lots of seeing that, right? Lots of glimpses of it. It wasn't a one and done thing, broken. It wasn't a belief that was done and dusted. It's a series. It's the same series of learnings at a more and more profound level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that comes back to trusting ourselves, right? We have all the answers to our problems, to our questions in life. We just have to figure out how to unlock them, and that can take different time frames
It's
for
taken us
different
both
people.
decades. It's taken us
Yeah,
both decades.
yeah. You have to be patient with yourself too, right? And that's a problem I have. Like I can be very impatient in those things. Like I want the end result now. But that's not how it works. So it it is an understanding of yourself, an understanding of going through so many challenges and being able to pick apart the lessons from those challenges, which is always retrospective. You're not going to be able to figure those lessons out in the moment. You're going to have to reflect, which is a practice of not being afraid of reflecting.
Okay. So an idea has come into my head, an example has come into my head of an absolute cast iron, not trusting myself. So it's just absolutely night and day, right? So do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
Please go ahead.
Okay. So it's 2004, and I'm looking to hire a salesperson, right, to work for my business. This guy applies through an agency or whatever he does. He can only see me on a Saturday morning because he's working. So I open the door. There's nobody else in the office, just me. I open the door and he's there. And this guy has a look. Well, sorry. I let this guy in. I show him to the room where I'm going to interview him. I then walk through. I walk through to the bathroom because I need a pee before I start talking to him. I look in the mirror and I say to myself, I have such a bad feeling about this guy. He's making my skin creep.
Mm-hmm.
Guess who I hired?
Oh no.
He told me, he talked the talk, right? He talked the talk. He said, I asked him the questions about how he overcomes no's, how we, about his ability to stay with the task when and hit the target. And he gives me textbook answers, and I'm taking it. Anyway, so he lasted about 3 months, I think, and then we let him go. But I knew cast iron from the very first moment of seeing this guy. I don't, doesn't happen to me very often. Instant disliking for the guy, and I remember looking. So that's 19 years on, listeners, right? I remember looking him in the mirror and saying to myself, "Ooh, I really don't like this guy." And then he talked the talk, and I didn't trust myself.
So, do you have an understanding as to why you didn't listen to yourself?
Because I let him persuade me otherwise.
Oh, okay.
He talked the talk, and I was brought up very honest, so I tend to believe people. I'm gullible and susceptible, and I believe people. I take people at their word. I do stuff on my word. I deliver on my word, and I expect the same from others, and I expect people to be truthful. And it's a big blind spot. So anyway, I'm trying not to. I've given you quite a lot there. I'm trying to do a little bit less of this on the podcast, right? Put a bit less of myself in that. But given that this was, about trusting yourselves, and I was giving an example when I should have done. And also, I wanted to go, so I didn't want to go first, but I wanted to give you the option of going first because admitting this sort of stuff, it's kind of freeing, really, I guess, is it?
It's I think we all have examples of that. Adoptees or not, but I think adoptees especially can probably pull a lot of examples of being in the same boat of having an instinct reaction, a gut reaction, and then your brain is like, oh no, we can ignore that. That's not pertinent. That's not important. We need to put on a different face for the world so we're accepted better. I mean, my example in this at risk of sounding very like Freudian, you know, this is going back to my mother, right? Like, my example of that is I was continually, and with these anger cycles with her, every time an episode would kind of pop up, I would want to end the relationship. I would want to do that. That was my gut reaction, is like, this is the thing that needs to happen. And then I would have other people like my husband, who he understands this now, but at the time, because we've been together for 21 years. At the time, he had his own perspective of like his relationship with his mother he wasn't raised by his mother, so his relationship with his mother really wasn't there, and so he'd be like, oh, but she's your mother, like, what, you can't end that relation, like, that's, no, why would you do that, like, why would you walk away from that? And I would hear this from other people, like, oh, but she's your mother, like, that automatically you need to have a relationship with her because of that. And I would allow that to kind of pull me back from what I knew internally was the best decision. But I didn't make it because I let others persuade me into believing that what I knew was best for myself was not right. And so I try, and it's a practice. Everything's a practice, right? Like, I'm not 100% on this yet, but I try to really listen to my internal cues when a red flag is raised and I need to make a decision that maybe is not seen as the, I don't know, we'll say socially accepted one. But if it's the right one for me, and again, I have all the right answers for myself internally, then if it's the right path and choice for me, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability.
Yeah. So listeners, don't do as we did.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to figure out how to do that on your own. And again, it's practice. It's not perfect, but talking about it helps. Like, I think hearing other people's stories, talking about it with people you trust, is incredibly helpful. Like, you don't have to figure it out on your own, even though you need to listen to your own answers, but you don't need to go through it alone. There's people, always people that have an understanding out there that can help through it.
Yeah. So I guess what we're saying here, maybe look for the patterns, look for a pattern, and I think the question you asked me was the why question, because I explained a long cycle and I explained a long cycle, you know, kind of happiness in business, as to some extent, and I explained a one higher cycle, but actually I did the same thing because I didn't think that I could develop the skills, because I didn't think I was a good enough salesperson. My dad was a great salesperson, right? So somewhere along the way, he told me, I think he told me once actually, and other people told me, or I developed the idea myself, that I wasn't a good salesperson. I repeatedly hired other people. I didn't trust myself. I wasn't also I had patience. I wasn't patient enough to learn the skills. I didn't stick at it. I was coming from a scarcity kind of a place where I can't afford to lose the sales that I will lose on my learning curve. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I need an expert because I can't afford to lose the dough. So that was a scarcity kind of thing. But I did that probably with about, how many different sales guys did I hire? Probably about 10, maybe 6. I don't know.
Yeah, it's the bringing up the scarcity mindset is interesting because I definitely operate in that area of well, how it shows up for me is I'm always future thinking and trying to set up myself the best way I possibly can in the future. And so I automatically am expecting that, like, I am not going to have what I need. I don't have what I need now, and I'm not going to have what I need in the future. So I have to be that busy, crazy squirrel, trying to like tuck everything away. So I am providing for my future in some fashion, like, and I believe that is a product of my beginnings, right? Like, when you start off as a baby or as a child, not knowing where you're going to be and being like your future, and I mean, we can question if as an infant, like, have a concept of future, but that's not my wheelhouse. I don't know, but I think that unstableness is a perfect space for that scarcity feeling and mindset to kind of grow. And that's another practice for me is throwing that to the side and enjoying the moment and not continually feeling like my future is going to suck because I'm enjoying the moment. That's the next big
thing. Okay. The metaphor that came to my mind was a security blanket.
Yeah. It is a security blanket. Like it's that because it's like an evil security blanket, I guess, as it were. Like, because it's not necessarily a positive thing if you go too far, right? There is a level of like planning for the future, planning for other things to have an idea of scarcity. But if you go too far, it zaps all your joy out of life, and that's the opposite of security, right?
Yeah. What I meant was we're clinging on to a security blanket, and we need our blankie with us, like, and something about relating back to something about your mum, actually. So you said that she used controlling tactics to keep people, but it actually pushed them away. And it's almost like us wanting a security blanket pushes security away. We're coming by clinging on and looking to control stuff. We're actually creating our own insecurity.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems a little counterintuitive, but I believe that accepting an amount of risk and uncertainty builds security. And you may not be able to see it in the moment, but it happens down the road. And that is truly difficult to grasp onto and feel okay with in the moment. But it's so true, though. I know that most people can think about tumultuous times in their past, super big challenges that felt awful in the moment, and you did not know how you're going to get through it. But you got through it, and you learned some lessons, and you're better for it. That's not to make light of challenges, because they suck. And sometimes they are giant mountains that are hard to get over. But that there's always another side to it. Always another side. And I think by recognizing what you've already come from and through to this point, you're stronger for it. You can get through the next challenge. Maybe with a little bit of help. You might need some help, but you can do it.
Yeah. So the metaphor that's coming to my mind is somebody on a high wire, like on a what do they call them? Like they're walking across a
tightrope. I believe. Yeah.
They're walking along a tightrope, and they've got the stick. They've got the stick out to themselves, in the hands, both hands, and they actually are never straight. They're always adjusting, left, right, left, right, left, right. They're always adjusting in terms of the hands coming up, and they know and trust the safety net. They know and trust the safety net, and you said trusting ourselves is knowing that safety net exists, knowing not as a theory, but as a practice, as in you've fallen off before and it caught you, and it's going to catch you again, which is why you can afford to be wobbling on the tightrope when you're on it next time.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile to understand what that safety net is, because it can look like a lot of different things. It can look like, other people in your life, or assistance programs, depending on your situation. But it can also, and I think more deeply and honestly, look like yourself. Like, you got to trust in yourself that you can be a safety net for yourself. And I can't give you the steps on how to get there, but I can. Just circle.
I can.
Yeah, you can. Okay, great.
Yeah, it is. There's only one step.
Okay.
Are you listening? Listen, right? It's called insight.
Yeah. Yeah, and that can come from so many different places, and it feeds back into the practice of listening to yourself. It's all connected, right? Like everything is connected.
It is. So the next question is then, how do you have insights?
I think that can be different for every person, like where you get your insight from. For me, my insight comes from a lot of thinking and a lot of consumption of other people's stories, and like listening to how others have gotten to the point where they're at and how they've overcome their challenges.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that. Sorry to interrupt you, because that's the point of this podcast, listeners. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
That was a public service announcement.
It's so true, though. It's so true, because you can't. And this may sound like I'm kind of contradicting myself, but I don't think that you can reach understanding in a vacuum. Yes, I believe that you have all the answers that you need for yourself, but there's a path to get to those answers, right? And that path is going to look different for each person, but I believe it consists of digging deep into other experiences, other people's challenges, and understanding who they are and how they got to where they're at. And then you get to like take all that information and all that different points of perspective and insight and bring it into yourself and sift through it and see which pieces resonate for you to find the answer that you've got locked deep within yourself. And it, unfortunately, it probably take years. Case in point, we've got decades behind us, and in reaching that point, and still probably a lot longer to go. And that's part of life, right?
And that's great. It's great. For me, it's great about having the same insight at different levels.
Oh, I like that. It can hit differently, right? Depending on where you're at in your life.
Yeah. So it's a tap on the shoulder or a punch in the face.
Yes.
Sorry, but do you know what I mean? That's
absolutely.
So I'm conscious of time. Have you got anything else that you'd like to share?
Well, I guess I can share one thing that I do have offered up for my fellow adoptees, as a way to get your stories out there, out on the page, as it were. I do project coaching, and I teach a little bit of a novel writing class, in the sense of from a project coaching perspective, and how to go about structuring a novel if you don't know how to do that. So very beginner focused. And really, it's all about getting your words on the page, which is the hardest part of writing. Is actually just doing it. So I do offer a class for that. The next one will be starting in September. And you can find that on ulvencoaching.com/writing for adoptees.
Yeah. So there's a link to that in the show notes, listeners, because I know a lot of people are walking the dog, driving, or ironing. No, that's me. That's what I do. That's when I listen to podcasts. So thank you very much. It's been a fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Simon. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, listeners. Try. Bye.